In this video, I'd like to present a number of challenges to Christian ministers, and I'd also like to handle the difficulties with teaching that Ezekiel 36 is right now. Before watching this video, you should first watch the video, The Unveiling of New Israel. Jesus Christ is going to return, but even with or without his return, what is taking place right now in prophecy is New Israel. With the Bible being the written revelation from heaven, and with the Bible being the authority in all matters in doctrine, including prophecy, for us Christians, it is possible to work through the difficulties. Now, the main challenge to you is for you to be willing to watch these prophecies come to fruition for, say, 20 or 30 years, or maybe 30 or 40 years, and be willing to view Ezekiel 36 as coming to fruition at present. The charts from Ezekiel 36 aren't exactly moving at a fast pace. Matter of fact, there are times when the charts barely move in a 1 to 2 year period of time. Other times, a 20-year stretch can seemingly gain no ground. Ezekiel 36 began in the 19th century, and now it's the 21st century. And Ezekiel 36, being now, is barely ready to be taught. Ezekiel 36 lines up with other passages in the Bible. The prophecy of the return of the Jews is well known and widely accepted. The Amos 9 passage speaks of the Jews returning to their homeland. Also, you have the Romans 11:25 passage. Listen carefully. A partial hardening has come upon Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in. A good number of translations take the word fullness and translate it number. Basically, the partial hardening is Israel in its lost state. So a certain number of the Gentiles reaches maturity, after which the salvation of the Jews begins. The fertility rate of the Gentile world peaked out somewhere between the early to mid-1960s, and the fertility rate of the Gentile world has seriously tanked since that time. And so the fertility rate of the Gentiles peaks out in the early to mid-1960s, and then in 1967, the salvation of the Jews begins? Coincidence? It doesn't look like it. Some of the modern versions go further than the original language and translate what the Gentiles would be coming into, as in their salvation. But in the original language, Paul does not say where or what the Gentiles are coming into. He just says, until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in. The population growth rate may be what Paul was referring to in Romans 11:25. So am I saying, thus saith the Lord, regarding this interpretation of Romans 11:25? Not exactly. Romans 11:25 will be more fully understood as time passes by. But this could very well be the correct interpretation of the passage. And by the way, not all commentaries take the fullness of the Gentiles in Romans 11:25 as the salvation of the Gentiles. Also, Revelation 13 is an important passage to look at. The mark of the beast is introduced in the closing verses of Revelation 13. Verse 16 says, also it causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead. The verse says it causes all. Basically, everyone on the planet will be faced with the choice to take the mark of the beast or not to take the mark of the beast. Right now, there are 370 million people who live out in the wild, who don't speak the modern languages, and they don't buy and sell. Now, as more time passes, these types of people get fewer and fewer. But it is seriously questionable whether Revelation 13 is even feasible at present. How do you force people who don't speak the modern languages and don't buy and sell in their daily life to take the mark of the beast? Right now, nothing in Revelation 13 has come to fruition. When the mark of the beast is introduced, the entire chapter of Revelation 13 is going to shoot up on the screen, just like Ezekiel 36 does now, and the pegs are going to fit. Also, Acts 15:16 and Amos 9:11 need to be addressed. In Acts 15:16, it appears that Israel will be restored after Christ's return. After this, I will return, and I will rebuild the tent of David that has fallen. I will rebuild its ruins, and I will restore it. The passage quotes Amos 9:11. But in the Amos 9:11 passage, Christ's return isn't discussed. The Acts 15:16 passage could be speaking of a revisit. This may be the same as the situation in Genesis 18:10, where God says that he would surely return. The return was referring to the fulfillment of the prophecy in question, not a physical return. And then in Genesis 21:1, the Lord visited Sarah, which was referring to the prophecy of Sarah having the son of promise. But this was not referring to a physical return. Israel is being restored today, and Christ hasn't returned yet. Also, Jesus spoke of the age of wars in Matthew 24:6, which is the age that we are currently in, and this lines up with Ezekiel 36. The chapters of Ezekiel 38 through 39 speak of a war, which is going to take place in the latter years, according to Ezekiel. This war will take place in the age of wars. Ezekiel 36 through 39 argues for more time. The real proof that Ezekiel 36 is presently en route isn't due to an eloquent tongue or authority in the church. The proof is in the history that has come to fruition, and the history which will come to fruition in Israel. There are aspects of unfulfilled prophecy that we can understand, but there is only one road to Revelation 22, and we find out the details of that road as the road comes to fruition. We can understand Ezekiel 36 because the time has arrived to understand it. Someone has said, what will happen, will happen. And I add to that, what is happening now is happening now. And what is happening now is Ezekiel 36. We can understand New Israel in the latter years because this is coming to fruition right now. I also want to deal with some of the difficulties that come with Ezekiel 36 being now. What about New Israel and the tribulation? It's a good question. And this isn't an issue that needs to be answered at present. Neither do we have to answer questions like this to get to Israel. And yes, the tribulation will take place, but I don't have to reach out into the tribulation and prove what we have not seen in order to prove what we have seen. To prove what is now, just go straight to Ezekiel 36. It's the same with the rapture verse, the second coming, and the millennium. These prophecies have not taken place. Another real issue is the sealing of the 144,000 Jews in Revelation 7. The details of what this means hasn't been revealed at this point. That prophecy will take place in its own time, and at that time, the people on the earth will be able to understand it. Hear this principle. A prophetic passage will take care of itself. All it needs is time. A prophetic passage is not dependent on what we believe is going to happen. Now, what is the difference between these prophetic charts and mere trends? Truth be known, most of these verses in Ezekiel 36 could be plugged into other countries, even now. But there are 3 charts that are unique to Israel. And those charts are the immigration of the Jewish people, the Messianic Jewish movement, and the wars in the Middle East crisis. All 3 charts are miracles from God. Now, regarding the statement, "And you shall know that I am the Lord," not only is this statement in Ezekiel 36, but this statement is in the Old Testament quite frequently, and it has targeted both the rebellious and those who submit to the Lord. What is this referring to? From time to time, both the saved and the unsaved acknowledge the God of Israel, but it may not necessarily be acknowledged vocally. It can be. One of Israel's enemies said that the God of Israel changes the direction of their rockets in midair. This is acknowledging the God of Israel. Next, regarding the reputation of the Jews, Ezekiel 36:15 says that it will go up. Today, they have their own state and a head of state. 200 years ago, all the Jews were nomads. Today, what takes place in Israel is broadcasted across the world. Okay, so the Jews get persecuted and the state of Israel has enemies. But the Jews are far better off today than what they were 200 years ago when they were all nomads. Ezekiel 36 is presently en route. It's on the way up. Also, regarding the safety prophecy in Ezekiel 38 verse 11, the safety factor is en route. Israel is a much stronger nation today than the Israel of 1948. This is en route. However, the safety factor still has a long ways to go. Regarding the use of the word day in Ezekiel 36 verse 33, this use does not always refer to a 24-hour period. In Isaiah 19:18, the use of the word day is referring to a time period. Ezekiel 36 is a time period which began in the 19th century. Also, what about Ezekiel 36 taking place in the millennium instead of right now? The prophecies in Ezekiel 36 are linked up to the prophecies in the 4-chapter series, Ezekiel 36 through 39. Ezekiel says that all 4 chapters will take place in the latter years. A very important factor is the war in Ezekiel 38 to 39. God calls for the sword, which means they fight. There's war. When King Jesus comes down on the earth, wars stop. The war in Ezekiel 38 to 39 takes place in the latter years, not in the millennium. And Ezekiel 36 is linked up to Ezekiel 38 to 39. Ezekiel 36 is not in the millennium, but in the latter years. Christian minister, I have a challenge for you. My challenge to you is to accept Ezekiel 36 as being right now. If you can't accept it, my next challenge to you is to be willing to watch these prophecies for 20 or 30 years, or maybe 30 or 40 years. In closing, let me say that the unveiling of New Israel does not need the endorsement or vindication of man to continue. With prophetic passages coming to fruition by themselves, all this needs is God's approval. And one more challenge, and I like this one. Approach me. Approach me with questions. The more difficult, the better. Ask me difficult questions based out of Ezekiel 36.